88.1 The Burg, your Music Central. My name is Nathan. Welcome to What to Watch Weekends. My name is Nathan, as I already said, because I forget how time works, and I am hosting today with a reoccurring co-host, if you'd like to introduce himself.
Yeah, hey guys, my name's Walter.
Yeah, Walter, you've been on the show before.
Yeah, a couple of times before.
Yeah, I was very glad to have you on the show then, and I will honestly say right now, it's great to have you back.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Honestly, it is actually really cool because today is the last What to Watch weekends of the quarter. So nice to have you on. I was glad I wasn't just going to close it out by myself. So I guess we should just kind of jump into the basics of it. We are going to be talking about some Denis Villeneuve movies. A lot of people have probably heard of that name recently, what with the release of Dune Part 2 out in theaters now, which we will be talking about. But for those of you who are unfamiliar, Denis Villeneuve is the director of movies like Sicario, starring Emily Blunt. Am I saying that correctly?
I have no idea.
Fair enough.
That sounds correct, so it probably isn't.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very true. But it's Emily Blunt. I haven't seen the movie. Prisoners with, I believe, Jake Gyllenhaal and Russell Crowe, or it's Christian Bale.
One of them.
One of them, yeah. And the first movie that we're going to be talking about tonight, since it was this morning, oopsie daisy, I got it mixed around, because it was the first movie I talked about on What to Watch Wednesdays at night. We are going to talk about Blade Runner 2049 to start off this morning on What to Watch Weekends. So, Walter, I hope you're ready for this, because I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's just jump into it, honestly. So, Blade Runner 2049 from 2017, available to watch on Hulu. My first biggest point is, plot line aside, I feel like you kind of have to watch the original one.
Yeah.
Like, you can watch it beforehand, which is what I did, or you can watch it after the fact. I feel like the important thing, and I was even asking you this, I was like, please tell me you've at least seen it at some point in time. Like, you can watch it.
I've seen both of them.
Yeah.
I make it a thing at least once a year. I'll watch both the movies back to back, but then I'll forget, oh, these movies are really long, and that's like 5.5 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, at least you're watching them, honestly, but yeah, no. Actually, that brings up an important question. Do you usually watch the original first, or do you watch 2049 first?
I usually watch the original first,
Okay.
but this year I didn't, so.
Oh, fair enough. For this week, so the reason I bring this up, honestly, and the reason I'm asking you is because I used to have a friend back in the day, and this friend was like, had some crazy opinions. Trust me, like about film specifically that drove me up the wall. Like he said that color movies are better than black and white movies because they are in color. I'm not even.
That's really just opinionated. Like,
it is.
There's no correct answer there.
Yeah, no, that's what annoyed me about it. But regardless, he was watching Blade Runner 2049 with his family, and I asked him if he'd seen the original, and he was like, "No, I never have." I don't remember if he said he never would, but it just kind of annoyed me that anybody who watches Blade Runner 2049 and pretends like it's a standalone thing is gravely mistaken, in my opinion. Like,
for sure.
It's like it's a very good movie, don't get me wrong, and it's a very good continuation, but to ignore the fact that like a classic 80s sci-fi movie is what precedes it and inspired it in the first place, it's kind of it's ignorant in the most basic of terms. So I honestly do think the first one is just an absolute classic.
Oh, for sure.
But that it doesn't take away from this movie at all. It's just the fact that you have to watch it at some point. I will also say, in terms of, so that's like the required viewing in terms of watching 2049. Have you seen the 3 short films?
I saw the anime one.
Okay.
And I think that's the only one I've seen.
Okay, fair enough. So, as you said, there is one that's kind of anime focused.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it was about these rebels trying to break into a facility.
Yeah, and it was really well done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember, like, so the way the short films work is that it's basically like in the 15 years or so leading up to 2049, which is the year that the movie takes place. they're kind of like in 2030 something.
Mm-hmm.
In that one, I think it was like 2045. So it's like it's 4 years
that.
before the events of it's like the closest one to the actual movie events. But yeah, no, I remember it being very well done. Cyberpunk anime really does. That's not even like it is funny, but it's not necessarily a joke. Like there are some iconic things to come from cyberpunk anime, specifically like Ghost in the Shell and Akira and Neon Genesis Evangelion. Like the cyberpunk and anime kind of go together, and I'm glad they kind of did it for Blade Runner. Like it fits. It fits the mold very well. I don't know. Like, would you say?
I'm not the biggest anime fan in the
Fair
world,
enough.
so I don't really have an opinion and speak on this. But
Fair enough.
like it was like a really like I don't want to say stereotypical, but like it was like a really just classic anime. Kind of. It had that style.
Yeah, like kind of the 90s over animated type of thing. Like that's always cool to me personally. But yeah, no. So we rambled on about the anime one. The other let me tell you about the other two actually.
I haven't seen the other two.
Okay, so the first one that they made was about you. So first off, this is like one of your favorite movies, right?
Yeah.
You know that Jared Leto is like the evil tech billionaire guy in control of everything. So they made a short about him introducing, I believe, the next like a new series of Nexus AI.
Okay.
It's a very short one, only about 9 minutes, and it's just him being creepy. Might have even only been on about 4 minutes, but it was Jared Leto being creepy. So
nice.
He made
Yeah. I figured he'd do pretty well at that.
Yeah. I remember weirdly that the lighting in that short was actually really good for some reason. But yeah, that one set up his character well enough because like I didn't really know what to expect from him, and just watching that before watching the actual movie really does kind of build stuff up. And then the second one is about so at the beginning of the movie, Ryan Gosling fights Dave Bautista.
He's the bald guy that plays what's his name from Guardians of the Galaxy? Drax.
Drax.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's that guy.
Yeah, no, it's him. So they made a short film about his character from 2049. It's basically about him being a vigilante and then getting outed as a replicant after trying to help like a young girl. So it's like, okay, interesting. I think he dies within like the first 30 minutes of the movie, though. So
yeah.
It could feel a bit pointless if you're looking at it from, oh, he died, but it's like it gives you some background, at least a little bit. And I think when you make like miniature short films before the release of a big movie like this, I think they're really more for world building than they are for like the actual
like theatrics.
Yeah, no, I think it's not necessarily for the core of the narrative of the movie that's going to follow them.
Yeah, it's more for like setting up the lore behind the characters and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think these three like did a very good job at that. So I really wanted to give them a shout out. I just couldn't fit in time to talk about them during the review of the actual movie. So
right.
Now we can go on to the actual movie. I only have a couple things to say, and like I said, this is one of your favorite movies, so I really want to hear some of your opinions on it.
Well,
but I want to go through like at least 2 points first, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So, first off, I really liked Ana de Armas. Not just because she's an attractive lady. To be honest with you, it's really because she's a good actress. Like,
for sure.
Like, she played. So, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, Ana de Armas, who was the star of the first Knives Out movie, she plays this like AI companion to Ryan Gosling in the movie. She's basically just a hologram the entire time, and I feel like if you put a less qualified actress in that role, they could maybe play it like an actual plank of wood.
Yeah.
Like if you tell someone to act like a robot, they might act bland or they might act boring.
Yeah.
For her, I was like, are you sure this isn't a human? Because it's a hologram, but I have feelings of sadness for it because she's so like distraught.
Like lifelike.
Yeah, the lifelike, and also just distraught at the fact that she can't really be with Ryan Gosling because she's a hologram.
It's a hologram, yeah.
Yeah, like how do you make that work? I feel sad for like lasers.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you do that? Good writing and a good actress. That's how you do it, honestly.
Yep.
And I think, and half of that equation is a good actress. Ana de Armas, wonderful performance. And personally, I do really like cyberpunk as a style, as a genre. But I also add the caveat that if you're going to make it, you're going to have like a budget and a lot of talented designers behind it.
Yep.
It's not something that you can't really make a good independent cyberpunk movie. You could, but it wouldn't necessarily have the same oomph to it. Like you can write a very good story with it, I'm sure, but the world and the set design is not going to measure up to these big budget movie studios putting a bunch of money into it. Like it's not going to look on the same level of polish, and there's going to be corners cut, and it's really going to be about the story, which when it comes to cyberpunk stories, I feel like the world is just as important as the storyline to it, because it's really about how society is decaying, and it's basically post-apocalyptic in like neon lit futuristic cities. So it's like you got to have a good enough budget to really cover that scale. Not to say that it couldn't be done. I'm just saying it'd be very difficult, and you really got to have enough backing and time and effort into it to really make it breathe. So that's all I have. I think just the biggest thing is like it's so dense. That's the big thing about both Blade Runner movies. Their visual design can be so very dense, even when it's like kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Like there's so much going on in the visuals that it's like, okay, I have to follow with a bunch of different things. But yeah, not to ramble on for too much. I was just thinking about that, and that really was interesting to me. So, without further ado, I'd like to ask you, Walter, what are some of your opinions here?
So, well, I gotta say it, like right off the bat, Blade Runner 2049 is the movie that like introduced me to like Ryan Gosling as like a meme character.
Right.
But like before like I was aware of the meme, I'd just see him and I'd be like, oh, it's Blade Runner guy.
Yeah.
Even though like that's not even he isn't even the Blade Runner guy.
No.
Technically that'd be Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
I just had to say something about that. But again, what you said about like visual design is like you could take any frame from the movie and like just take a screenshot of that and you'll just see all sorts of stuff and little details and like characters and signs and cars and all sorts of stuff just going on in one screen, and also it just looks nice.
Yeah.
And it's like easy to follow, and that's like a really, really hard thing to do.
Oh yeah. Like I do love movies where you can kind of just take any frame from it and really like you
can just look at it and be like, oh, this isn't busy, but it also looks cool.
Yeah. It's dense but well packed.
Yeah.
But like they finally crafted each material before they packed it in.
Yep.
Here's a good test for it. Would you say that like if you could take a frame from it and blow it up and make it into like a poster, it could work? Like you could.
Yeah.
You could, like I'm just thinking like that fight in the garage or whatever, in the parking garage. Like you could easily make a poster going like, "You look lonely" or something like that. Well, that would be for the giant purple holographic lady.
Yeah.
But it's like, I see what you're saying. Do you have any other like?
That's about it, really.
Fair enough. I mean, honestly, you're exactly right. You kind of just.
Another thing is like, there's not a whole lot of dialogue in either of the Blade Runner movies. It's a lot more of one of those show don't tell movies, and where actions are more prevalent than what characters are actually saying.
Yeah, although that is funny that you mentioned that, because for those of you who don't know, the original Blade Runner had about 15 different 7, half of that, but still like that's multiple versions. It had like multiple cuts of it, and in the original version people didn't like it because the studio was annoying and decided to have Harrison Ford narrate over the entire thing.
Ooh, I haven't seen that.
Don't. I've heard like one audio clip from it, and he's just going, "Replicants are the future of society or something.
Yeah.
It's like, it is so, like, okay, Harrison Ford particularly, he's the kind of actor who always just looks like he's done and tired, which, good on him. He's old. He kind of deserves a break. I don't think he really needs to act anymore, if he doesn't want to. If he wants to, fine. If he's getting paid, that's fine. But it's even funny to just compare, like, back in the 80s, he still sounded so done with life. Although it was kind of obvious because he was being forced by the studio to write it. Like, I'd be kind of annoyed if it was like, well, I like the movie that, because the actors get to see the movie after it's kind of been assembled. I'm sure he got annoyed looking at it and going, what do you mean that I have to, like, record narration for
my own dialogue that I wrote?
Yeah, it's like, what do you mean I have to, like, narrate this entire... I thought it stood on its own as a movie. I feel like Harrison Ford is smart enough to go, it doesn't need narration. He could have put his foot down and said, it doesn't need narration, and they still could have gone, yeah, but we need it. It's like, oh, great. I don't know.
Oh, no. Yeah. I'll have to look into that. Probably not, but...
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend, like, watching the actual movie. I'd probably just, like, find a clip of it on YouTube and just hear it for a second. But not to like derail your point at all, because you're absolutely right. That's part of the reason that the final cut of the movie is like the kind of accepted version, is because it gets rid of all the narration, it leaves in all the scenes that were cut out, and it kind of just lets you sort of follow along. And it's really kind of, it's just kind of an intense, thrilling sci-fi movie that you have to kind of keep up with as you go to really get what's going on. And so I think that really does it. Your point stands. It's just that the original version would not have had that going for it were it not for a bunch of dedicated fans going, we need the final cut.
Yeah.
So that's just the big point. So I think that's all we've got to say about Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. I'd highly recommend it. Personally, it's not one of my favorites, and neither is the original, but I think it's one of those situations of it's a very good movie. It just won't end up in my top 50 at any point, which is fine. Not every movie has to do that. I think if I were to rewatch it, I'd probably like it a lot more, maybe because I was just tired when I was watching both of them. Like, no joke, the first time I watched the original movie, I was like half falling asleep, and I stopped halfway through because I was like, if I have to smack myself to stay awake watching a movie, it's not because the movie is boring, it's because I'm staying up too late watching it. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna come back to it.
Yeah, I remember when I saw 2049 in theaters when it came out. Yeah, and that was certainly an experience.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah. And I remember on the drive back home, I saw it with one of my friends, and he was like, I don't get it. And I just, every time I watch this movie, I just think of that situation, or the feeling where it was like, oh, that was a great movie, only to have my best friend be like, yeah, I don't get it. That was a weird movie.
Ooh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that we don't yet, apparently, because I've seen more videos talking about the ending of it than the actual movie itself. You were telling me that you watched the movie Enemy last night, didn't you?
I didn't finish it because I fell asleep for the ending, but it was an interesting movie. I was like looking at the IMDb page of the director, and I sent to my friend, I'm like, hey, what of these movies should I watch besides Blade Runner? And he's like, Enemy's a good movie. I didn't even see what it was about or anything.
You just started watching it?
I just started watching it. And it's one of those movies where it's like you don't really understand the plot until about like halfway through.
Oh.
And like it was a weird movie at the start. Within the first like minute, there was some really weird scenes. There was like a scene where there was like a tarantula being like squished.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's a weird way to open your movie. I thought that was really funny, but
yeah, okay. Let's back up here for a quick second.
So the movie is about like
one quick thing.
Yeah.
Let me just look up the year and stuff like that. So Denis Villeneuve is the guy who directed the new Doom movies and Blade Runner 2049. that's the reason we're bringing up Enemy, is because Enemy from 2013 is a thriller movie directed by Denis Villeneuve. It's apparently about a college professor played by Jake Gyllenhaal who has a look-alike actor and then like takes over his life or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the basics of
Yeah.
it? Okay. So I will say before we jump in that I have only seen one clip from this movie, and it is one where it's like, it was like a meme about like coming home after work or something like that, and it was Jake Gyllenhaal kind of walking down the hall and then walking into a room, and then there's just this like giant spider taking up half the room. It's basically just a wall of spider, and I thought to myself, I don't want to watch this movie. No, thank you. Yeah. I have like crippling arachnophobia.
For sure.
I mean, like, I had the only scene I think that I've been able to force myself through, in terms of spiders, was the spider encounter in the Hobbit movie, the second one. I think that was the which one was that one? It was either Desolation of Smaug or Battle of Five Armies. It was Desolation of Smaug. In Desolation of Smaug, there's this big scene where the Hobbit and his dwarf friends run into some spiders, and there was a lot of them. But I kind of forced myself through it, and I thought it was cool. But yeah. At any rate.
So in Enemy, like, you don't realize what the movie's about until like about the halfway point.
Right.
Because it's about the Jake Gyllenhaal's character being he's a college professor, but he's like really like depressed. And he's like, oh, I'm doing the same thing day in, day out. I teach, I go home only to come back and teach again.
Right.
And then one of his coworkers is like, hey, you should go see the movies. You look down, go see this movie. And he's like, I'm not a big movie guy, but okay. He goes, he like rents the movie, and then he's like, whoa, this character looks exactly like me. I'm gonna like stalk this guy.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And then it was like it was about him like just wearing sunglasses to like get into this actor's like house and like his office and all these things, and him being like falsely recognized as this actor who, mind you, wasn't even like a main character. He was like the background character, like FBI agent number 2.
Oh wow.
Desk attendant.
That's even
and
crazier.
He was like this really rich guy, which he ended up like taking over his life. I remember like there was this scene where it's like both the lookalike and Jake Gyllenhaal's character were in, it was like a hotel room, I think, and he's like, the lookalike was like, whoa, you look just like me. We must be brothers or something. And it was a really well done scene because you could feel like the awkwardness and like uncomfortableness of like, oh, we're like identical twins, but we have never met and we sound the same and all these other things.
I should ask, is the lookalike played by Jake Gyllenhaal, or is
I think so. It's either a lookalike, like stunt double, like a really well done one, or it's just like the magic of editing.
Okay.
I'd have to look that up.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so it brings up an important question though. What is the deal with the spider?
So it was about him. I didn't see the ending, mind you.
Right.
I fell asleep, but like there was all these weird scenes where it would be like him having like a weird dream sequence of him being like rich and famous, and it's him, Jake Gyllenhaal, starring in all these like movie scenes as a famous actor.
Right.
And like it was dream sequences where him just doing movie things only to find out, oh, that was a real movie I'm going to star in later in the actual film.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
it was just really weird. I don't.
Yeah, but where does the spider show up in those dream sequences?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Like it opened with a dream sequence, a really kind of gross one,
Right.
It's like a spider being squished, and I'm like, oh, that's really funny. That's a weird way to open your movie.
Right. You said that, but
Yeah.
So you're saying that the spider always shows up in these dream
Yes.
sequences? That's okay. That's good to know.
Yeah, and then I'll be like, oh, he's just doing something. He's like, oh, he's a chef, but he opens a platter only to have the platter be full of spiders.
Yeah.
And like all the dream sequences had something to do with like a spider.
Yeah. I hope you can understand. I do not have any interest at all in watching this movie. I would rather watch something about I don't even know like I'd rather watch House of a Thousand Corpses than watch this.
Yeah.
Which I wouldn't want to watch that movie anyways because it's called House of a Thousand Corpses. You kind of already get the idea of what it's about, but like versus like watching spiders. No, thank you. No, thanks. So there's that. Interesting. I hear that the ending of that movie is so confusing, but I think it's very funny that you fell asleep before it happened.
Yeah, I was reading the Rotten Tomatoes page, and a lot of the reviews were like, yeah, I just don't get it.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I'll probably watch the ending tonight.
Yeah. Tell me how it does end and what it means, because now I'm slightly curious, but I'm also not too curious because so many spiders. If it's got like more than one significant scene of it, no thank you.
Yeah, there's like 8 or 9 of them.
Oh, no thanks. No thanks. And I think it even ends with like a big spider taking over the city or something like that.
I have no idea.
I know for a fact that like one of the famous screenshots from it is this like massive one with like super long legs. It looked super like messy to me, and I was like, but so that's been Blade Runner. That's been Enemy, original Blade Runner. Just a little bit here. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to talk about Dune Part 1 and 2. So hopefully you're excited for that.
Yeah.
I know I am. All right. So stick around after the break. 88.1 The Burg, your Music Central. My name is Nathan. Welcome back to What to Watch Weekends, joined by my co-host Walter today.
Yo, what's up, guys?
Yo, what's up? So, since it's after the break, we're going to be talking about the new Dune movies, which you told me that you actually haven't seen.
I haven't seen either of them.
Fair enough, I guess. I mean, do you just watch a lot of like new releases? Or
I don't.
Okay, fair enough. I mean,
I don't. It's half because I don't care enough, and half because I'm just busy.
Yeah, I get the busy part, honestly, and not caring enough. Like, that's fine. But for a lot of people who are listening, they've probably seen the original Dune at the very, like, when I say original, I mean the first one from
it's like 1982, I think.
Oh no, I'm not talking about that one. Not everyone has seen that one. I'm talking about
Dune, the one that came out just the other year. I think 2022.
It was 2021.
2021.
Yeah, that was like 3 years ago. Wow. Time flies.
No.
Yeesh. Anyway, I'm old. No. So Dune Part 1 from 2021, available to watch on Max or on HBO Max, whichever one is worse. So I guess I should tell you, do you know the basic plot of Dune?
Vaguely.
Okay, vaguely. So it's about Paul Atreides, who is a son of the leader of House Atreides, basically this rich family. It takes place in the very distant future, and they have like space travel, and they're gonna go and take over the planet Arrakis, which has spice on it. This magical substance that basically allows them to travel space. What's so funny?
Oh, it's just there's a lot of jokes I can make here, but
yeah, no, fair enough. Hold off on any of the jokes until after the fact. But basically, spice controls everything. It's kind of a rare commodity, and it's only on the planet Arrakis. And so the Atreides family goes to take it over at behest of the Emperor, the ruler of their universe or galaxy or whatever. And then the Harkonnens, another rich family, used to control Arrakis, and so they come back to fight the Atreides family to get the spice back because they want the spice, and they're kind of rivals with the Atreides outside of the spice stuff. So it's a very kind of a big back and forth with a lot of different names and a lot of moving parts. The big thing to remember as well is that Paul can see, he has visions, and he also teams up with the Fremen, these people who live on the planet Arrakis. They're people with blue eyes because of the spice for some reason, however that works. Magical science nonsense. But basically, that's the long and short of it. If you knew nothing about it, like that's just basic. Did any of that sound familiar at all, honestly? Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So, I guess to jump into it, when Dune Part 1 was announced, I think I was originally just interested in watching the 1984 movie.
Yep.
Right? And so I did watch it, and we're going to get to that later in the show because I have some negative opinions about it because I don't like it, and I thought it was boring. But
fair.
Aside from that, I watched the original Dune movie, and I was like, okay, that wasn't very good. And then I heard about Dune, the Dune movie coming out in 2021. I watched the trailer, and I was like super excited for it because I was like, finally, I might actually get to see a good movie out of this story. Okay, great. Let's go with that. It made me more excited to see this movie, honestly. So I was hyped for it. Although I wasn't hyped enough to go see it in theaters, mostly because it was 2021, like October of 2021.
That's fair.
It was like part of it was probably because I was lazy, to be completely honest. But the other part of it was I avoided going to see Godzilla vs. Kong in the theaters because of, COVID. I was like, is it really worth risking getting sick to go see a movie in the theaters? No. I do understand the idea of, there are some movies that you just gotta go watch in the theater, which I do agree on some level, but it's like, I'm not gonna risk getting sick for certain movies. Like, and there's like a very slim chance that any movie would kind of go above that bar. And so I just kind of skipped out on going to it. I watched it at home on my monitor. It wasn't the best experience in comparison to the theater, but it was like, it was what I had, and I honestly I don't regret it just for the sake of, well, it was either that or risk getting sick. So I'll go with I'll go with the less dangerous option. I should also mention that I basically so I watched it when it came out onto Max. They did that thing where they were releasing movies onto the platform the day they'd release in theaters just because of the pandemic. And so I watched it back then, and then when I went to see Dune Part 2 on Sunday, I rewatched it beforehand just so I could get myself up to speed and really kind of get back into the world. Very good choice, first of all. But I also noticed, have you ever watched a movie where you're like, oh, this is kind of slow and methodical, like it's kind of taking its time, and then you rewatch it and you go, wait, this is a lot faster than I remember. Yeah. Well, can you give me like a?
Well, I mean, Blade Runner is a very good example of that.
I could see that.
When I first watched it, I'm like, man, this is a really, really long movie. But now I'll watch it again. I watched it a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, huh, that was, 2 hours went by, but I didn't notice.
Yeah, and even then, it's like it's 2 hours, like 45 minutes. It's very close to 3 hours, but you're like, oh, it's only about 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I could see that being a thing. So, fair enough. I do find it kind of strange how that kind of thing pops up. I guess when you know the plot points and you're not really like on the edge of your seat, you're kind of like, you kind of expect the punches as they roll, I guess is the way I'd describe it. So,
nothing.
Okay. So to move on to my next point, when rewatching it, so I completely forgot that Rebecca Ferguson was in this movie.
No, really?
Yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to Rebecca Ferguson, I really like her as an actress. I mostly see her for her role in the Mission Impossible movies. I don't know if you've seen any of those.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. Have you seen the newest one?
I have not.
Oh boy. you at least know that Rebecca Ferguson is basically like this, well, like an MI6 agent who teams up with Tom Cruise. Like, her character is really good in those movies, and I kind of just automatically associate her with that character now.
Okay.
And so when it came time for me to rewatch Dune, I was like, oh, wait, she's in this movie. I don't remember that. That's a new one. So I find it just kind of funny how that works, that you tend to forget things if you're not super invested. I'm invested. It's just like, it was weird. So here's the big question. When it comes to like high fantasy sci-fi movies, what kind of language do you kind of expect them to sort of have? And when I say language, I don't mean like alien languages, although that is part of it. I'm more so asking, like, do you think they kind of talk like they're in medieval times a little bit sometimes?
Yeah, sometimes. I've noticed that a lot.
Yeah. That was something that sort of threw me for a loop about Dune when rewatching it, is half the time the main character, Paul, played by Timothy I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Yeah.
I would have it in front of my face and I still wouldn't know how to pronounce it after the first try. But I was like, wow, he's switching between talking like he's in mid-century Europe, or he's a teenager just going, hey, Dad, what are we doing? It's like, okay, which one is he? I get that he's kind of both, because he's like the son of a very powerful aristocratic family, but he's also like a young kid essentially in the story. Like he's implied to be about like 18 or something like that, and it's like, okay. What's his? Which one is he? He's both.
He's both.
It works.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. But I was kind of thrown for a loop. So that's my only issue with it. So I guess honestly, I should really give the biggest backstory, which is the movie Dune is based off the book Dune by Frank Herbert. Very popular sci-fi novel.
Yeah.
Like,
I got a weird piece of trivia about the book.
Ooh.
When he was originally trying to get his book published, Frank Herbert, no publishers wanted to publish his book because they're like, oh, this book's too dorky. This book's for nerds. We're not gonna publish this. But so the only company that would publish his book was a company that did automobile repair manuals.
What?
Yeah. And it's the only like actual book this company's ever like published
Wow.
that wasn't a car manual. Yeah. So,
that is really funny, honestly. I mean, to think about it, like distant future, like in the year 10, it's like 100,000
something. Yeah.
Like spaceships and cars are kind of interchangeable.
The same thing, basically. Squint hard enough.
Yeah, squint hard enough, and they're the exact same kind of mechanism. I mean, Deep Purple didn't write a song called Space Truckin' for nothing. Anyways, so no, that is very funny. But to kind of talk more about the book, I haven't read the book.
Neither.
I don't have time to read the book. I'm not a very big reader. I used to be so into reading books. But when I was in that stage in my life, if I had tried reading Dune at that point in life, are you familiar with the book Neuromancer at all?
I've never heard of it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but yeah.
It's fine. It's actually really funny. You might like it because it's this guy, I think William Goldman is his name, and he basically watched the first 30 minutes of the original Blade Runner and went, I should write a cyberpunk book. And he basically invented cyberspace.
Nice.
And then made a book about a guy who like plugs himself into like neon 80s cyberspace and teams up with a samurai in Neo Tokyo with mirror eyes.
Nice.
And has his like mentor as an AI floppy disk. Meets this guy who's like basically Morpheus, but like larger and more muscular. And then they go hot air ballooning with a bunch of Jamaicans as they try to hack a big corporation and fight an AI. So I don't know if that sounds interesting to you at all.
Yeah, that sounds great.
It is. The only issue I had with it is its ending. But the reason I bring up Neuromancer is that at a certain point, I was like to my mom, "Oh, I kind of like sci-fi books," so I read Neuromancer at the time. That probably would have been the time in my life where I would have been like at the right place to read Dune because I was big on sci-fi stuff. But I was also, this was like a couple years ago, and so thinking about it, I probably wouldn't have been able to comprehend Dune because it's notoriously difficult to kind of wrap your head around all of it, what with all the political intrigue, like the story of the Atreides and the Harkonnen, like what we see in the movies from any adaptation is a very small sliver of the picture, and they're kind of the fortune telling society and the emperor.
That's what I've read. Is the book was about like kind of a reflection of politics at the time,
right?
And that's like a total turnoff for me. But
no, it is. It has a lot more going on. It's a lot like Lord of the Rings, in which they cut out like entire scenes just because it's like we don't need to hear Frodo and Sam like walking over the swamps and stuff like, and like kind of internal monologues and stuff like that. Like you could do it. It just require a lot more time and effort and money to really make that work in a movie setting. And you can't necessarily, like with a book, you have infinite time. With a movie, you do not. And your audience is going to get bored if they have to watch the same thing happen over and over again, or they have to watch a lot of talking because they want action. But I will say, I would have found the book confusing. Watching the movies, I'm able to wrap my head around this aspect of this, like the sliver of the story that they give you. It's enough to kind of wrap your head around because even if you get a little confused, you can kind of wrap your head around. Okay, this is Atreides, this is Harkonnen. They're all underneath the Emperor. Here's Paul. Here's his family. Here's the Harkonnens. Here's what they want. Here's the Fremen. Here's the spice. Like you only have to keep track of like 3 big groups, whereas in the other, like in the book, I'm sure there's like mentions of the other families aside the Atreides that are like probably have all their own backstories, and then there's like his mom being like this part of the fortune telling society known as the Bene Gesserit or something like that.
Something,
yeah.
A lot of times when it's like books being adapted in movies, they have to like cut a lot of stuff out just for, many different reasons, time, budget, whatever. Yeah. And I always say like watch the movie first, because if you read the books first, you'll be disappointed, because every time I've done that, I'll be like, wait, why didn't they add in such and such scene or this scene, or why didn't they do that? And I'm like, it just ends up being disappointing to me.
Yeah, I can see that being an option, a strategy for sure, because it's like, especially if you see it visually, usually with a movie, like if you have enough imagination,
that too,
you can imagine what's going on in the book, sure, but like if you see the movie beforehand, you have a very good baseline of, okay, they decided to make it look like this, and they probably did their research if you give them the benefit of the doubt. So you can kind of imagine the scenes in the movie kind of being played out in the book, and you can also go, okay, here's a scene that isn't in the movie, but I can imagine what it looks like. I can kind of imagine the characters. I can kind of imagine the setting. I can kind of like go off the style that they used for the movie and apply it to the book. Is that part of it as well?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I think that is kind of an interesting way of looking at it, because you're right. I'm sure people have like just watched a movie that's an adaptation of a book and gone, oh man, this is horrible.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's kind of to be expected at this stage. You can really never have a perfect adaptation of anything ever. That's just how it works. So, yeah. Okay, here is one of my big questions when it comes to the books. And like, you haven't seen the movies. But I personally am a fan of dark fantasy. In stories. Like, I like the Dark Crystal. I really like Berserk. I kind of dabble in the dark fantasy setting a little bit, and I think Dune is kind of a dark fantasy sci-fi story in a way, with the Harkonnens being these kind of monstrous people who just kind of subjugate the Fremen, and the fact that the way the story kind of plays out is Paul goes to Arrakis with his family. They're gonna sort of get the spice trade up and running again, and they're gonna work with the Fremen to get it done, and then the Harkonnens attack and basically get rid of half of everybody. When I say half, I just mean like half the important characters in the first movie are killed off by the Harkonnens. And I kind of wonder, is it kind of a dark fantasy for that reason? Because in a lot of dark fantasy stories, normal things is that a lot of the important characters tend to die. Ones that you think are important are kind of sacrificed for the good of the main character. I think that's kind of a common theme. It's not really like a hopeful outlook. It never really has like a very positive message. It's usually about like death and destruction. And I feel like Dune kind of takes that turning point in the first movie where it goes, okay, here's where some of the important characters are going to start dying, and they're going to really kind of strengthen Paul. But it's not necessarily going to be easy because these characters are important to him, and so we're just going to kill him off because we think it's funny to torment him.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't know what you think, like if you have any experience with dark fantasy at all.
Not really. I know my parents are really into the movie Labyrinth
with
David Bowie.
Right.
And I don't really like that movie. It's really weird.
Yeah,
but,
fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I'm not like a super big expert, but I was just kind of noticing it just because it does take that turn of like important people dying. So it's an interesting idea. I honestly really like the Harkonnens in the story. Like, if you have the time, I would honestly recommend just looking at pictures of them from the movies because they look really cool to me, even though they're all bald. It's kind of a goofy. Their costume design is really cool, and they kind of went the extra mile of make the villains look cool. It's basically the Star Wars situation of let's make the villains all look awesome. And I feel like they would fit very well as like medieval fantasy villains, once again, with the dark fantasy thing. But I feel like if you put them in like 19th century Europe, they actually wouldn't look too bad.
Yeah.
I'm
looking at the picture right now. They remind me of the characters from that newer Mad Max film.
Oh yeah,
the one that came out just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I love
2014. But
yeah, I love Fury Road.
Yeah,
I love Fury Road. What are they called? Oh dang it, I forgot what they're called. No,
it'll come to me.
Yeah, it'll come to me too. They serve under Immortan Joe. That's the big thing. So I will say just a couple things. Just a couple more things on the first Dune movie from 2021. I didn't remember there being as much action as there was. I thought it was kind of like a slow plotting movie that was just kind of setting up the second part where they're going to have like this big fight or something like that. I was kind of mistaken. It's really more so like an action fest than I gave it credit for. It's a lot more it's a lot more intense. They have a lot more fights than I originally thought. So good on them for reminding me, hey, we sure are kind of a slow Denis Villeneuve movie, and things like Blade Runner 2049. It's not necessarily an action fest, but it's slow and methodical with good action scenes. And so good on them. I feel like you've seen Blade Runner 2049. Is that like that's an accurate description of it, honestly? And that was one. That's like the best kind of compliment I can give it, is that it holds up on rewatch. Mostly, there is a mild issue in that in the last 40 minutes of the movie, I feel like the writing or the line delivery takes like at least goes a notch down weirdly. Like it goes from like a 8 or a 9 to like a 7, or maybe even like a 6.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
It's like it feels a bit wonky in certain like scenes or something. Like Paul kind of like the actor's clearly is kind of stuttering just a little bit, or he's like he's not reading it with the same dramatic thing. He's like obviously kind of reading it off of a card rather than actually acting it out like a human person. And it's only in certain scenes during the last 40 minutes. Other scenes are completely fine. it's just like other ones. It's like, okay, what? It's not like it takes a big dive. It's just kind of like a noticeable slight drop. And so that was just one thing I wanted to bring up. I think that's part of the reason why Dune 2 has gotten such higher praise than the first one, is just because the first one is good, but it has some more noticeable mistakes, whereas the second one, like, there are a lot less noticeable mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think we will get to that after the break. We're going to take a quick little break. When we come back, we'll talk about Dune Part 2.
All right.
88.1 The Burg, your music central. My name is Nathan. Welcome back to What to Watch Weekends, joined by Walter.
Hey guys, what's up?
What's up? So, after our quick break, we are going to jump into Dune Part 2 from this year, available to watch in theaters now. That's right, we're talking about
a new movie.
This is kind of a new thing for What to Watch, the What to Watch series, just because I normally talk about old movies, as you're probably aware. I think the newest movie I've talked about was probably like Nobody from like 2021 in 2022, but even then it was like, okay. I don't, that was like a diamond in the rough. I usually just like, I talk about a lot of older movies or lesser known movies. I usually don't talk about like the newest, biggest one. So, savor it while you can, guys. Come on. To kind of jump into that aspect of it, I really wanted to talk about it just because I saw it recently. I also just was like, I have a bunch of finals coming up. I can't very well, I guess, afford to spend time watching other movies. And going through my list, like I'd have to find them, and it was like, it just kind of felt like the right way to close off the quarter, to be honest. So I decided to just go with it.
Yeah.
So I may be doing something easy, and I might be lazy, but don't worry about it. It's all.
I mean, it'll be like, oh, for me at least, I'll be like, oh, I've been studying on my finals too much. I need to like go outside and do something other than sitting at my computer screen doing homework or whatever.
Yeah, fair enough. For me, it's like when I'm doing finals, usually I get so stressed out that whenever I watch anything mildly funny, I just burst out laughing. So it's like,
yeah,
I just need to cleanse myself sometimes. So I guess to jump in, Dune Part 2 is more of a direct continuation. Yes, there will be spoilers for this movie if you haven't.
I haven't seen it, but go ahead. I don't really care.
Fair enough. For those of you who are listening in and do care, just be warned. We are going to spoil this. So I guess the first thing to say is that Part 2 is better than the first part.
Okay.
And that's not really outside the realm of possibility. There's always that talk of like, oh, sequels aren't as good as the original. And I'm sure there are a lot of examples of that. But like usually when I end up watching a sequel, they can be like a lot better. Maybe it's just because I pick them well enough. But like, for example, the prequel series to Planet of the Apes, like the second one and that one is like really good. That's the best example I can think of. Like you've got like the John Wick series where each one seems to be getting better. There's just, I feel like there's good enough examples of them kind of improving that it's a weird argument to make these days that no movie is like the sequel is never as good. There's enough examples out there to kind of prove that wrong. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. And then again, there is also the Megamind sequel that came out recently. Have you heard about that?
I didn't even know that came out.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so
Megamind, like the blue guy?
Yeah, he's the blue guy, played by Will Ferrell. It was like the DreamWorks animated movie that was really good.
Man. Yeah, I didn't even know they made a sequel for that.
Yeah, they made. Have you seen the first movie?
I have.
Okay, so do you remember anything about it, or was it too long ago?
That was forever ago.
Okay. So. To give you just the rundown of it, it was like a really good superhero movie that like kind of deconstructed it with like aliens and stuff like that. It basically parodied like Superman in a perfect way and with a really good cast. and it was very funny,
Yep.
and creative and interesting, and memed to death.
Yep.
And then they made a second one wherein they didn't cast Will Ferrell as the main character.
Dang, they already ruined it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then they made the animation look horrible because it looks like he's made out of plastic. I'm not even kidding.
Oh, boy.
If you just look at a picture of it, it looks so awful. But that's neither here nor there because we're
Nice.
talking about Dune.
Yep.
We're talking about Dune. Avoid the mega line. So, Dune 2, it's better than the first part. Like I said, I watched the first part before seeing the second part, just to kind of get them back to back and really kind of get myself re-immersed into the world. And one of the things I particularly liked about Dune 2 is that Dune 1 kind of set up a template, quote unquote, as I'd call it. So you know how sometimes with sequels, the movies don't always kind of blend together. Like, have you seen the John Wick series at all?
Yeah.
Like, they're good, don't get me wrong, but like each one feels like kind of a scaling up, and the fourth one, if you watched it, like fourth one versus the first one, would you kind of expect them to be like related?
Somewhat connected, yeah. I've
Somewhat.
only seen the first two, so
Okay, fair enough.
yeah.
I guess to just give you an idea, like you've got a lot more going on in the fourth movie than you would in like the first movie. The first movie is like a very simple sort of revenge thriller. Fourth movie is like a globe-trekking adventure where he goes to places like Asia and like the middle of the desert and like rides a horse and stuff like that.
boy.
Like
Yeah.
it's really good. Don't get me wrong, but they get like massive in scale, and it could be seen as like a subversion of it. And
Okay.
to compare it to like Dune, wherein they both start up with this very deep voice kind of chanting in this alien language about spice, and then go into kind of the opening scene, and then they do this sort of blur transition, and they play Dune Part 1 and Part 2, and then they all kind of follow the same structure for like formula. They use the same font for the subtitles when they're talking in the alien languages and stuff like that. Like they are very similar in style to the point where I go, it is unmistakable that they are from the same series. And I feel like that's something to be celebrated because some movies tend to evolve as they get sequels if they're good. And ones that are like, oh, the sequel's better than the original. Like, sometimes they kind of play on it a little bit and they kind of go overboard. For example, Terminator 2 is a very good example of one that comes close to what Dune 2 does, in my opinion, but it doesn't. It still goes for that kind of evolving past it because it follows a very similar structure. It's a Terminator from the future coming back to the past. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger. But then they have like the liquid metal Terminators where they have like super high-tech 90s effects and stuff like that. And then there's like the big action scenes with the motorcycle chase and stuff like that. Like I feel like it's a different change in scope and scale to what the first movie was setting up. Whereas in Dune 2, like they are more kind of genuinely and like fundamentally connected. If you kind of, I don't know if you're getting the kind of analogy here.
Yeah. I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, like
I didn't even think of Terminator
Yeah.
as an example of this, but now thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, like you've got they kind of, and I'm not saying that evolving past the original is a bad thing for a sequel to do. If you're gonna make a good one, usually you have to, right?
Yeah.
Like you kind of have to. But I feel like it once again plays into you can't make the excuse that sequels aren't as good anymore. Because now we've seen proof in Dune 2 that you can kind of fit it into the exact same sort of mold as the first movie and maybe sharpen the writing just a little bit, and all of a sudden you've got a better movie.
Yeah.
And it's still following the same sort of formula, still structure, and you've got a good template for it. And I feel like that's kind of like now we're pushing through to, okay, now you can just make a regular sequel and have it be good. So it's an interesting sort of change in the industry, I think.
Yeah.
And so there's that. I mean, there's I think they are gonna plan on making a part 3, unsurprisingly, because they've made a bunch of money off the second one already. So they're just
that makes sense, I guess.
yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I was kind of surprised to see how commercially viable Dune was when it first came out, like Dune 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you remember like a bunch of people around you talking about it at all?
I remember all my friends talking about it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'll see that movie eventually.
Yeah.
I never did, but
Yeah, no, I like when it came to me, I was surprised to see which people were like actually really excited for it. There was a friend of mine who was like, I was like, I don't expect you to be all that into like sci-fi movies. She was like into watching Tom Hanks and stuff like that. And not to say like Tom Hanks is bad. I love Tom Hanks, but it was like I wasn't expecting her to be into any like highbrow sci-fi movie. And then she goes, "No, yeah, I saw Dune in theaters. It was really good." I was like, "What?
yeah.
You kind of thrown me for a loop here." I was kind of surprised at just how commercially viable you can make such a kind of high nerd fantasy thing for a general public. I think that speaks more to how the movies really kind of convey the story. You can't adapt Dune without kind of cutting corners, and I think they cut the corners in the right way to make the audience really on board with it. Mm-hmm. So, once again, good on them. So, all right. What?
Nothing.
Okay. So, I think it's time for something kind of goofy. Mm-hmm. I hope you're ready, Walter.
I'm ready.
Okay. So it's time for the most trivial and nonsensical rant I think I will ever make on either What to Watch Wednesdays or What to Watch Weekends.
Okay.
And I talked about Schizopolis. So this is saying something.
Yep.
My biggest question about Dune Part 2, why didn't anybody eat sand? Why did I not get to see Timothée Chalamet, I don't even know how to pronounce his last name, why didn't I see him picking up sand and, like, just eating it like Pop Rocks during an important scene? I wanted to see that, and it didn't happen. Why? Do you have a good answer for me here?
I don't. Yeah. I don't know. It's coarse and it's rough and it gets everywhere.
True, but it would have been funny. It would have been very, very funny if it's just like, you are going to overthrow my family. He's just like, I'm just thinking of like a meme I've seen of the animated Angry Birds movie where it's like, it's the bomb bird, and it's just like him talking to this girl going, hi, I eat dirt. It just her looking super confused, and then he starts laughing and dirt just pours out of his mouth. Like, that's what I'm thinking of. Like, that's the kind of scene I'd want to see in Dune. Yes, I want to see like an incredibly funny, comedic, lighthearted scene in our high fantasy sci-fi movie. I have weird standards when it comes to films. Like I said, it's really just a nonsensical, trivial point to bring up, but I think here's the biggest issue with this dumb rant of mine, is that I said it as a one-off thing when my friends were bringing up Dune Part 2. They were like, oh, you should go watch Dune Part 2. And I was like, okay, I'll go do it tomorrow. Fine. Get off my back. And when it came to watching Dune 2, I made a joke about like, oh, does anybody eat sand in the movie? Or no, I didn't even say that. I said, is there sand in the movie? Because it's called Dune.
Dune. Sand dune.
Yeah, there's going to be sand in it.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, is there going to be sand in the movie? Like, low expectations at best. And they're like, oh, yeah, I know there's a bunch of sand. I was like, okay, cool. Does anybody eat it? And they're like, no. And I for some reason got that in my mind. And I didn't stop thinking about such a dumb idea until like Thursday. I'm not even kidding. Like, I kept going on about, why don't they eat sand? Why do they not eat sand? As such a dumb joke that was funny to only myself until Thursday. I feel like there was an issue with that, but it's not like a serious one. It's just that I found the most simplest and dumbest thing incredibly and extremely entertaining. So I'm sure you can relate to that, Walter.
Yeah.
Honestly, like you and I have talked before. You find incredibly insane things funny.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think it's wrong. I think it's just funny. I honestly am not taking it seriously. If they shouldn't have eaten sand, it's not like that would have actually helped. That might have made things worse in the context of the story, because like the spice that's in the sand is supposed to be like psychoactive substances. So like if you eat that, that might have actually caused more problems as time went on. To be completely honest. So time for an actual rant that is not trivial and ridiculous and goofy. I hope you're ready for this one instead. So, in the Harkonnens sort of area, they're led by Baron Harkonnen, who's played by Stellan Skarsgård. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. You know who I'm talking about, right? He's a famous Swedish actor, and he's basically like the head of the family. And he has a couple of nephews. One of them is played by Dave Bautista, who did a great job. In this one, we get introduced to the Baron, who is another one of his nephews. Take a guess who plays him.
Who?
Austin Butler.
Really?
Yeah, you know who Austin Butler is, right? For those of you who don't, he was the guy who played Elvis in the 2022 Elvis movie, and he got like I remember people were like, wow, his portrayal of Elvis is really good. I don't know, like, you're an Elvis fan. Have you seen the movie?
I have not seen that.
Oh,
I didn't even know that came out.
Oh, okay, fair.
Yeah.
Well, at any rate, it's kind of for me. It was very funny to see a guy who was like kind of a pretty boy. Who, when I say kind of a pretty boy, I mean very much a pretty boy. His picture looks like the most pretty boy. He looks like he was a part of the British version of One Direction. To be completely honest with you, and if One Direction is British, I'm making a massive mistake.
They are, but
oh,
yeah.
Oops. Okay, so the American version of One Direction. At any rate, he looks like a pretty boy.
Yeah.
Because he played Elvis, and so he is a pretty boy. It's so funny to see him play a character that's just downright psychotic, terrifying, and very, like, ruthless, and also completely bald. Like, he's, I'm not kidding. He looks like menacing. You were showing me that picture of the Harkonnens. That was him.
The screaming guy.
Yeah, that was him. He looked kind of like weird, and like that to me is like a really good transformation. Like that shows. It's kind of like Christian Bale, who tends to like lose weight for his roles and stuff like that. Like there's a dedication there that I honestly kind of really applaud, because you go from being like an actual pretty boy to playing a ruthless space demon, basically. Like that's a really good transformation, and he's good enough. He's a good enough actor to really pull it off. So good on him. Here's one thing that I noticed about Dune Part 2. And I actually want to hear your opinion on this. So the basic plot line of Dune 2, after the first movie, basically the Harkonnens kill the head of the Atreides, Paul's father. Paul goes off into the desert. He meets up with the Fremen. He and his mom kind of get taken in, and they start their journey to sort of take back the planet from the Harkonnens. In the second movie, they kind of continue on their journey. People from the Fremen start to think that Paul is like the chosen one that they've been looking for. They're kind of like messiah of their religion. And so he eventually grows more powerful. He conquers places with one of the Fremen girls, who is Shani, who's played by Zendaya. I'm sure you've seen pictures of her, and like with like the blue eyes and the kind of armor. That's her. And so she and Timothy's character basically start fighting the Harkonnens. They end up winning. People think that Paul is this messiah, And over the course of time, they get the attention of the Emperor, who basically sent the Atreides to Arrakis to get killed by the Harkonnens. The Emperor is played by Christopher Walken in this movie, and I like
Nice.
Christopher Walken.
Yeah.
But over the course of the movie, Chani, like, they fall in love, and then she goes, "But I don't want you to, like, be the Messiah. I don't really believe in this kind of thing, and I think this is going to your head." Which, spoiler alert, it absolutely is going to his head. He basically dreads he dreads becoming the Messiah at first, and then he lets it go to his head after he drinks this, like, magic water, quite literally, and can see everything and decides, I'm going to wage a holy war, literally. Just, I'm going to wage holy war. And the movie ends with Chani running away. She's like, I'm the only one of the Fremen who doesn't believe in Paul. I'm going to leave. That was not in the original story. Even in the first movie, like the 1984 version of the movie, that was not in it. But they kind of changed that up for the kind of concept of the theme of Frank Herbert's original story, which is about people who follow messianic figures and let them get too much power in the world. I think it's kind of like you said, it is kind of a commentary on politics of the time, and I could see how that might have influenced their sort of choices in the movie. But and in the book as well. But here is something interesting. I was told by, like, a Dune super fan that the, like, whole don't follow a messianic figure when they have too much power thing was the point of the original book. I will admit that when watching the movie, I actually got a very similar theme from it without that, like, context, which I think is, like, if there's any way for me to kind of properly convey that their theming and the story execution was done right, like, I'm not even, like, a super fan or a fan of the books at all, and I still managed to get the story of it. Like, I don't know what you think of it. Like,
I vaguely know the synopsis of the book.
Right.
I was reading this blog post where it was totally incorrect, but he was saying how the Dune, the book, was a allegory for, like, the Reagan administration and, like, the war on drugs and stuff like that, even though the book predated all of that by, like, 25 years.
Yeah. So that's what it is, as you could see, like, you can probably see the Messiah angle a lot more than the Reagan administration, hopefully.
Yep.
So what I got from it, though, was it is kind of about messianic figures, but it's not from the perspective of the followers.
No.
What I got from it was it's really more so about how Paul is, like, kind of a bad person to get messianic powers. To think about it, from the very beginning, he's the son of, like, a rich royal. His mother is part of the Bene Gesserit, who are basically the future-telling psychics of the universe, who can see, like, alternate timelines. Like, they are incredibly mentally powerful, and they have, like, this special voice that allows them to command people to do something. And once he gets to the planet Arrakis, he, like, falls in love with the Fremen and basically, like, wants to be their leader, and is sort of recognized over the course of time as being their chosen one. That, to me, I think the message is kind of clear that you shouldn't really let a spoiled brat become your messianic figure, because there's probably a chance that he'll mess up, or he's just going to let the power go to his head. And I'm sure you can kind of imagine, even without it, like, think about it. He's already got, like, two very powerful traits from the very start of his life. And now he gets to this planet as, like, a teenager and is told, you are the chosen one to lead our people to victory forever and ever. Like, I could imagine that going to my head. I could imagine that really influencing the person I'd become later down the line. And I think with Paul, it's quite obvious, especially by near the end of the second movie, that he has let it go completely to his head. Like, he is winning every battle and is basically an unstoppable force. And I feel like it's that, again, plays into the dark fantasy of, if you let these people get power, they will wipe out the world. Essentially, they will conquer everything, and they will, like, nobody's going to stop them. If you don't stop them early, nobody will. I feel like is the kind of premise of it. If you let these people get power, you have to stop them before they get too much of it. And so I keep in mind, I got that without having read the books, without having talked to this fan like beforehand. I just got it from watching the movie. And so, like, round of applause for honestly conveying such an interesting premise. And I feel like as you said, you've only know the premise. I only know the premise. I think that if Frank Herbert were around and he heard that sort of interpretation of it, I don't think he'd disagree with.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think it's close enough to his original idea that he would probably be like, yeah, no, that's pretty close. That's a good interpretation of it. And he seems like the kind of guy who would be like, art is partly your own interpretation. It's partly what the audience thinks it is. So, honestly, I kind of just want to applaud them for conveying such an interesting idea, because I do kind of like religious themes in the stories. They can make for some interesting commentary, and also just kind of make for some. It's a very flexible thing within any genre, even horror. Like, you can make demons be scary easily. But that's neither here nor there, because Dune is Dune. And you know what else is Dune, Walter? The 1984 version, directed by David Lynch.
That's the only one I've seen.
Yeah.
And I saw that in high school at a friend's house, and I remember just kind of hating it.
Yeah. I remember really hating it.
Yeah.
And I really want to rant about it. I could talk about more Denis Villeneuve movies, but I think this is a special exception. I think we really just need to. I have so many things to say about it. So many things. So, I will say, stick around after the break for when we will jump into Dune 1984. 88.1 The Burg, your music central. My name is Nathan. Welcome back to What to Watch Weekends.
Hey, y'all. My name's Walter.
Welcome back, Walter. What am I saying? Welcome back. You've been here the entire time. Welcome back after it's been so long. It's been about what has it been? 5 minutes?
Something.
Oh, it's been 5 minutes. So to close out this morning, we are going to talk about the original Dune movie from 1984, available to watch on Max. I hope you're ready for this, man.
Yep.
I really hope you're ready for this, because I am going to go off on this movie. I do not like it.
That's the only Dune movie I've seen, so.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll have some things you'll at least be able to kind of follow along a little bit better than hopefully with the other two. And I really do care about that, because you're my co-host.
Yep.
No real reason having you here if you can't give some good commentary, and I know you can. It's just, it's really just like we gotta make sure to set it up for each other. So, let's just jump in. So, my first note is quite literally, yep, I watched this first. This was my first Dune experience.
Yeah.
Oh boy, I was bored.
Yeah.
I was bored.
That is a totally fair statement.
Yep. You know how bad it was? I was rewatching the trailer for it last night because I didn't have infinite time to watch the movie again, and I didn't want to watch the movie again. But I was rewatching the trailer. Could you believe it if I told you I was bored watching the trailer? I was straight up just I was sitting in a position where I'm kind of just kind of hunched over, and I think my brain got so bored that I was like, should I sit up? Nah, I'm bored. I can't move. No movie I think has made me so bored that I go slack-jawed.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, there have been some things that I've watched that have been so boring or brain dead that they do make me go slack-jawed, kind of intentionally on my part. But it's I feel like I could exaggerate. There was no amount of excitement rewatching the trailer. There was no oh, I need to rewatch this movie. It looks interesting enough. Usually the way I describe it is in my brain, I kind of feel this like really sort of buildup of anticipation, or this kind of tingling in my head of like, oh, this looks cool, or oh, this is really making me feel emotions here. Like I feel this kind of emotional, physical response to something that I think is cool in a movie. Watching the Dune trailer from 1984, I felt none of that. Like nothing whatsoever. There was only like a faint amount of any response whatsoever. That kind of speaks to the dullness of it, because even if I was forcing myself to not be excited, like I usually can prove myself wrong if I'm actually excited and just forcing myself to feel one way. I had no expectations, and I was disappointed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it. I've only ever seen it once, and that was when I was in high school.
Right.
And it was at a friend's house, and I remember watching it, and then like at the end of the movie, I'm like, huh? I'm just like, that was a dorky movie.
Yeah. It really is.
And then like there's just scenes where like nothing happens.
Yeah.
And that's like every other scene in the movie.
Yeah.
Or it's like two characters are in a room and they're just talking,
Yep.
and then that's it.
Yeah. Nothing feels like it's happening.
Yeah.
At all. And it's so slow, and like here's my biggest issue is that like I don't think Dune is an inherently dorky thing when it's portrayed in a certain way. Like, I know you haven't seen them, but have you at least seen like trailers or images?
I've seen the trailers
for like the newer Dune movies. So you know their like style that they're going for.
Yep.
It's very much more of a action slash kind of it's a bit like sword and sandals kind of style. Like, it's not like a straight up sci-fi movie. Like it is very heavily sci-fi, but it feels like they're really injecting other things into it to make it not like a pure sci-fi movie. Like, I guess the big thing is like when watching the movies, I was like, I kind of forgot or didn't really notice how much of the Fremen culture is kind of like almost Arabian in a way.
Yeah,
like
I see that.
It's not even to be like mean or any state. It's more so like they live in the desert. They have to kind of grow accustomed to it, and a lot of them do wear kind of these head coverings, and they have this sort of very similar sounding language to it, and they have like this messianic figure in their religion. Like there are some parallels, and I noticed it more and more what with the way their music for their group really sounded. It sounded like kind of this echoing chorus, this booming feel to it, that I was like, okay, this feels like kind of based on a specific religious group, probably Arab. And so I don't want to say it to be like offensive or kind of assume stuff. It's just like it has that feel to it. By contrast, Dune 1984 is just a space movie.
Yep.
And that is not good.
Yeah, I originally thought it was like somebody's like failed Dungeons and Dragons story before I even knew about there was the Dune the book. I just thought, oh, this movie is a really bad movie. But
yeah, no, Dungeons. That's really funny. Honestly,
I'm like, oh, this is somebody's like Dungeons and Dragons campaign they turned into a movie.
Yeah, and there has been stuff like that. But it's like, did you expect it was like, oh, it's just Dungeons and Dragons but in space?
Pretty much.
Yeah, fair enough. So, yeah, you can probably get the idea that this movie is just not enjoyable to watch. One thing I was reminded of while watching the trailer, I've run into this with some movies before, and I don't think it's necessarily a fault of Dune exclusively, but when watching, and it might have been because it was like a remastered trailer, and so it kind of stood out a little bit more. But especially in the 80s, there are cases of the audio does not sound good.
Yeah.
In this one specifically, where we were watching the trailer, it had that feel to it of like they were screaming into a toaster, and the audio that they recorded was what was coming out the other end as they opened up the bottom of the toaster to let the crumbs out, as the actors screamed through it in the recording booth. Like, you kind of get you can kind of imagine that it's a very hyperbolized thing, but it's like, I'm sure you kind of know what I'm talking about already. It sounds like they put like some kind of aluminum foil over the microphone or some kind of like sun covering.
Recording underwater.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Like like metallic underwater somehow, like a liquid iron maybe. Like it sounds so washed out and bad that it like hurts to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing is part of it. And I feel like part of it is because it's from the 80s. And notoriously they weren't as advanced as now.
Part of it's that. Yeah.
Part of it's that, but
part of it's that. Part of it is, I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Because I don't know, low budget, whatever.
That I think is part of it, because I think there was like a lot of budget constraints. There was a lot of things that went wrong when making this movie specifically. There was a lot of like director overwritten and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I think that partially is to blame for the movie not working, but there are aspects of it that kind of stand on their own as no. Even with like full creative control, this probably wouldn't have been as good as they think it would have been.
Yeah.
And to start off, you've seen images of the eyes from the newer Dune movies. Yep. Again, it's from the 80s. I'm cutting it just a little bit of slack because I personally like the 80s. I like cheesy effects.
Yeah.
But there is a line that I will draw. And for this movie, I draw the line at the eyes. They do not look good. Okay, you know what it looks like? At best, they took each individual frame off the reel. They put it down on the table. And then Jerry, who they like called from his like, I don't know, his garage or something like that, was like, hey guys, I melted down a bunch of translucent blue plastic. Let's put it over their eyes in every single frame. Is it going to look good? No.
Do it anyways.
Do it anyway. They pull out the eyedropper and just drop it onto each eye in every single frame. I'm kind of exaggerating, but like, I feel like part of the issue is that it was made in the 80s when they couldn't have facilitated the effects as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to not look good in a few years.
Yeah.
And you can't make the argument of for the time it looked good, because even for the 80s, I've seen better looking movies from the 80s.
Oh, for sure.
Honestly. Like, They Live was from the 80s.
Yep.
The Thing was from the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, the original Terminator was from the 80s.
Same with the original Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, even that.
Those are great movies.
They look so much better. They look so much better. And I think it comes back to what you said, budget.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the main issue.
And the 80s was like, mid-80s was like the turning point when film companies were going from, analog and like real film to like digital computerized editing and stuff like that.
Right. And I think the analogy that I gave of like the translucent plastic onto the reel and stuff like that might not have been incredibly accurate, and I think for the time it could have looked good. That doesn't mean it looks good.
No.
It does. I'm sure even at the time it was kind of goofy looking anyways. It just has that quality of, even if you excuse it, it still just doesn't look good.
Yep.
You could give so many excuses, it still just doesn't look good. Full stop. Even so, like, the whole melted plastic thing, that's like, at best, I feel like it looks more like they put food coloring on it, honestly.
Eyedropper food coloring.
Yeah. It's just, that would explain how they managed to make it look so translucent. Forget, like, masking and opacity stuff, like, making it actually work in a modern context. Nah.
Yep.
Just like, thin out the liquid. There you go. Blue eyes.
Nice.
Blue eyes. Very nice. Okay. I don't know if you remember any of this aspect of the movie. Do you remember the acting from this movie?
Vaguely.
Do you remember it being good?
No.
Exactly.
Yeah. No.
So.
Yeah. I remember like scenes where it's like they're just a bunch of characters sitting at a table and they're just talking and nothing's happening, and then like they're not really good actors, and then like I feel like some of the actors were like so bad they had to be like cut, so there's like weird cuts where it's like, where did this guy come from?
Right.
Who is this guy?
What's he doing?
Yeah.
Straight up, here is one thing I was happy about when I saw the announcement for the new Dune movie in 2021. I was glad that they cast a known enough actor. I was kind of excited to see what Timothée Chalamet was going to pull off, because the actor for Paul in 1984 Dune is so bad. I was looking at the comments for the trailer, and one guy even said it was like, "Oh, this was like this guy's first movie, and he did a very good job." And that's normal for a lot of movies on YouTube. When you see the trailers, they're like, "Oh, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I watched it with my grandparents," or "This actor's really good." I'm not going to excuse it for Dune. I excuse it for literally every single movie that I see the exact same thing happen to. Dune, I will not excuse it. That person is wrong. He is a very bad actor.
Yeah.
Let me tell you exactly what his big problem is. He couldn't act because he runs into that amateur issue of he's either talking too loud or too quiet. Yep, as you can probably guess. And there's no in between. It's one of those two ranges. And each time he talks, if it's too quiet, it's kind of annoying because I can understand what he's saying, but it's like, stop whispering like that. You're making me uncomfortable. Or when he's screaming, it's incredibly grating to listen to. Again, no in between for those two. It's either grating and loud or annoying and quiet, which that's not good. If you've got no range as an actor, stop. I will give it to him that he maybe pulled off being in the movie well enough. That's about it.
Yeah.
He wasn't a good actor. I remember that standing out to me so vividly of like, shut up, please. Every time he yelled, it just sounded like a bird dying or something. It sounded like an animal losing its life, actually. It's kind of like that meme out there of like, I am a surgeon. It's like that, but if it was like more guttural and from the 80s with bad recording. So, wonderful. Okay, another issue I had. The Harkonnens in the new Dune movies. You've seen like what Stone looks like.
Yeah.
And he's like the bald guy, the very large guy with the kind of floating pack and stuff like that. Like, he looks cool.
Yeah.
He looks interesting. In the original Dune movie, Baron Harkonnen is disgusting.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I know morally he's supposed to be disgusting. I get that. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, like, visually to look at, he makes me want to throw up.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a very disgusting visual, so follow me here for a second. His face looks like it was filled with a bunch of pimples. He picked every single one of them, and then they came back and he picked them again and again and again.
Yeah.
And now the entire left half of his face is just boils.
Gross. Yeah.
It is very disgusting, but it's an accurate visual. If you looked at a picture of him from that movie, like, you'd be like, oh no, that is 110%. For our listeners, like, please do look up a picture of Baron Harkonnen from Dune 1984, because you will find I am not exaggerating at all. It looks exactly like that. The nephews are not disgusting looking, but they have the issue of, you know how I told you about Nabaron, the like other nephew?
Yep.
The one that was played by Dave Bautista, that character is also in this movie. And I remember him looking goofy and weird. So, and I remember him being like badly acted as well. They did have Nabaron in this movie. Guess who played him?
Who?
Sting.
Ooh.
They
really?
got Sting in this movie.
Huh.
He's the. I think I remember when I saw it, I was like, oh, Sting is in this movie. Is he good? I don't think he was, honestly, to be honest with you. It's just like, I don't remember him being good, but in comparison to Paul, he was pretty good. But it's Sting. Like, what were you thinking? It's Sting. It's Sting. I could scream about this. I will give some props to the movie in that the scenery and the set design are fine. Like we were talking about with Cyberpunk, and Blade Runner, usually it's like cluttered but not like busy visually. For this movie, I feel like it is a little busy, but not to a detrimental point. Like, it looks good for the time. And
for sure.
Especially probably considering that the budget was kind of low. I think they did the best with what they had. I also think that the music for the movie, when rewatching the trailer, I was like, oh, I kind of remember this music just a little bit. Like, it has a recognizable theme to it. So it's got that going for it just a little bit. So the biggest issue with 1984's Dune is that, like, so the original Dune book is very long and has a lot of parts to it, and they basically took 2 movies to get through the first book, right? In this movie, they cover the first book, and I think even like part of the second book after the Atreides beat after the Fremen take back Arrakis, and after Paul becomes like the big emperor of the galaxy or something like that. They fit the entirety of that into this movie. How did they do that? Well, they didn't.
Yeah.
Not well, at least. That's part of the reason it's so boring, is because they take all of the major plot points, squish it into a movie.
They just read out the book verbatim.
Yeah, and then it just doesn't fit because they just don't know how to write the script for it. They just didn't know how to write the script. I would honestly just say, like, don't watch Dune 1984, even if you're like, oh, I got to see it for the sake of I've seen the newer ones and I want to see how it started off. Don't subject yourself to it. It will only cause distress and pain.
Yeah.
It's just not good. I don't know. Do you have anything else? Like,
not really. No.
Just don't watch Dune 1984. Watch the new Dune movies. I'm sure you can agree with that, even though you haven't seen them.
Yeah.
So, well, that has been our show. Thank you all for listening in. Thank you again to Walter for being on for the last What to Watch weekends of the quarter.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. Definitely hope to have you on in future shows for the next quarter. For my regular listeners, I will not be hosting What to Watch Wednesdays next week, and What to Watch weekends will not continue next week. I will be on break. When we come back, I will resume the regularly scheduled programming. So thank you all for a great quarter, and good luck on finals to the students. We will see you all later.
Peace.
Peace out.